All right. Okay, take 1677. Because if you think that YouTubers, guitar YouTubers, are one-take people, you're out to lunch. What's up guys, Frank here from the Gear Couch, and in this video, Gear Diary number 2, I would like to talk a little bit in depth about my favorite piece of gear, which is the 2 notes Torpedo Captor X. Now, as you can imagine, this video is not about being on the forefront of presenting you a new product. Like it happens very often these days. Something new comes out and you see a lot of channels releasing videos on YouTube at the same time. It's more about why this is my favorite piece of gear and why this might be useful for you as well. And when I was looking into the stuff that I'm using on a daily basis and trying to find what is actually my favorite, I was looking at different guitars, I was looking at different pedals, and also at different amplifiers. But then it kind of struck me because the Captor X is something I'm using every day, sometimes multiple times. Whenever I'm playing guitar and the only thing I can use to hear my playing is a set of headphones or studio monitors, the Captor X is involved. Whenever I just finished a batch of pedals and I want to quality test them, which usually happens very late at night, my son is asleep, my neighbors wouldn't be thrilled about a lot of noise, then I use the Captor X and I just use the headphones and I can test all the pedals to all extent and happy. So for those of you who are already familiar with 2 notes and their products, this video might be a little less interesting maybe, but for everybody out there who has never heard of 2 notes, and especially for you guys out there who love playing their tube amps or guitar amps and crank them up, and need something that is kind of an ultimate tool, whether you're playing live or you're recording at home or even recording in a studio situation, this might be an interesting video for you. And we're also going to look a little bit into 2 notes history, because they were around for a couple of years now and they didn't immediately get to this very convenient form factor. So let's look at where it all started. The company 2 Notes was founded in the beginning of 2008 and later that same year launched its first product, the VB101, the Torpedo VB101, which was a 2 rack space rack unit. And it was actually the world's very first digital load box, which must have been very difficult to go to market at that time, because I remember that at that point we had a couple of cabinet simulators that were analog, and a few of them had maybe a few presets. Some were affordable, like the Houston Kettner Redbox Pro or the Palmer PDI-03, and others were actually quite expensive, such as the SPL Cabulator. And then 2 Notes comes around with their VB101, and most people must have been thinking, what the hell is a digital load box? What do we need this for? So I don't know about their first 1 or 2 years of business and how it went for them, but I remember my first encounter with 2 Notes, which was around 2010. I was still working in retail. I recently had changed to the product management department. I was always looking out for like the next cool thing that we could add to our assortment, maybe something that others didn't have, like the competition. And I was also checking what was new in other departments, such as PA, recording, pro audio, etc. And suddenly, this name came up, Torpedo VB101, which sounded so odd that I immediately had to check it out. And when I found out what it is, it was really, really interesting to me. because back around that time I was just about to put my amp collection in storage and go the digital route. I wanted to record guitars at home, but I was living in an apartment in a building with very, very thin walls, and I mean, if my neighbor on the lower floor was listening to music, I could hear it. So recording guitars at home was a very difficult task. I had tried different solutions such as isolation cabs. I actually built an isolation cab myself, but none of it was really convenient to me regarding the sound. And sometimes it also wasn't that much isolation, so my neighbors were still able to hear it. So nothing that I tried really sounded as I wanted or wouldn't be silent enough. So, long story short, I took the VB1 home with me. I hooked it up to my diesel VH4, which was my main amp back in the days, and immediately, bang, I was sold. All my problems were solved. I was able to crank my amp, record at any time of the day with a huge array of different cabinets, microphones, and even more important, I was able to change the distance and position of the microphone to find the best possible sweet spot for the sounds that I wanted to create. Two Notes then continued to launch products of that very same nature. They introduced the VM202, which was more focused towards guys who were using rack preamps or even pedal preamps. And it also had a power amp simulation built in for that purpose. In 2013, Two Notes went a little bit more compact with the Torpedo Live, packing the features of the VB101 into one rack space, which was definitely more convenient when you wanted to use it live. And at some point, the craziness about pedals had reached like a new peak, and they also launched the Torpedo Cap to accommodate people that were using pedals and pedal preamps. A year later, they actually updated the VB101, calling it the Torpedo Studio, with the very same kind of two-space rack format, but they had then introduced new features such as dual miking, post effects, making it the new flagship model for people who, for pro users, for studios. By then, the amount of available cabinet models had grown substantially, and there was way more variety than ever before. Eventually, and moving fast forward a couple of years, they were able to decrease the form factor into what is now the Torpedo Captor X. A very handy load box, attenuator, cabinet simulation that easily fits on the top of your amp, and needs very little space in your car, tour bus, etc., etc. There are at this point hundreds of guitar and bass cabinets available via the remote software, which also holds or held, I'm not sure if it's still called, but they had a funny name for that online shop of cabinet simulations. It was called Le Boutique, which sounded very nice. I don't think it's still around, I think it's just the shop now. So, and there's if there's a cabinet you're interested in, you can actually always audition it and see if it fits your needs, and then afterwards make the purchase. So, little pre-summary here. Looking at the history of Two Notes and the products they launched over the years, it is pretty safe to say that they are the spiritual fathers of that product category. Because nowadays we have products like the Auxbox from Universal Audio, we have the FryHead Power Load, we have the Sir Reactive Load, and so on and so forth. But Two Notes were the ones that really introduced that sort of product to the market. Or better, the man behind Two Notes, Guillaume. This is Guillaume. I remember that I met Guillaume for the first time at Musikmesse in Frankfurt, since I was working there for Diesel, I believe, that year. And I passed by the booth and I just said, thank you so much for the work and the VB101. You've saved my amp collection from going into storage. I was probably your first customer in Germany. And he thanked me very much. I then afterwards, I think we played a show at that Musikmesse and he came by headbanging and we had a lot of fun. And we eventually also stayed in touch, and he's still my favorite French person in the world. So if you own a Two Notes product, or any other product in that kind of product category that is trying to compete with what Two Notes does, we have this man to thank for, actually. So, you know what? Let's do this. Post about it by using the hashtag Merci Guillaume. And let's really thank the man for putting in the initiative, having the kind of vision to come up with a product like this, which is now kind of an everyday thing for many people. So I just talked in length about how I think Two Notes changed the way we use amps these days. And I also just talked about all these other gadgets we have now. So what makes the Torpedo series really stand out, and why do I prefer it over what the competition does? Here is why. Let's look at a couple of points. Number one, the form factor. The Captor X is just really compact and has all the necessary connections or connectors you need for whatever scenario. If you were forced to play without a cabinet on stage, for whatever reason, maybe it's a silent stage, everybody needs to use in-ears for some reason, you could just take your amp, you take the Captor X, and you'd be fine. Number two, variety of cabinets. Where some companies give you 15, 20, 22 cabinets, etc., Two Notes at this point offers you more than 500 plus different cabinets that you can additionally purchase to the ones that are already included, which is 32, I believe, a little bit more. And you're going to think, well, I think you might be thinking now, well, how the hell out of all these cabinets am I going to find the one that really fits my needs? Well, here's the good news. A, they're all well documented and explained. So the description is already going to tell you what kind of musical style, what kind of sound they're focused towards. So that's one filter for you to find the right category, the right collection. And the other thing is, you can try and audition them via the remote software at any time. So if you filtered it down, narrowed it down to a couple of cabinets or cabinet collections where you're like, okay, that's something that fits my purpose, then you just audition them and then you make a purchase. And the other thing is that Two Notes also works with a lot of artists and brands. So there's a lot of material out there to listen to on YouTube to check and see what kind of cab you might like. Number three, DynIR, or Dynamic Impulse Response Technology, which is Two Notes' proprietary technology to simulate a cabinet and room information and so on. So you might want to ask, what the hell is that? It's pretty simple, actually. So an impulse response is pretty much a file that contains information about a specific cabinet or speaker type, a microphone position, and then maybe some additional room information blended in. If we look at the possible options for that, like how many mics there are, how many different positions there are, angled, not angled, so there might be 1,000 options, and you would have to go through a lot of different files to find the one that you're looking for. Whereas the Two Notes approach is a lot more fluid, since you're going to choose the cab model, find a microphone that you like, or maybe already know that this microphone serves your purpose because you like how it sounds, and then you get to decide and adjust the position, the proximity. You can blend in additional room information. You also get a couple of post effects such as EQ, enhancer, reverb, etc. You actually get a noise gate in front as well. So if you have like a heavy sound, you can kind of get the silence in between. And you also, if you use the stereo out, you have another option called a twin tracker, which actually puts a minimal delay on one side, making it sound like it's actually two guitars. When you track two guitars, like one on this side and one on the other side, they're never 100% aligned, and that's what the twin tracker is actually simulating, which really comes in handy if you're the only guitar player in a band, or you're recording something real quick and you don't want to do 2 takes, and you don't have to double everything. So a lot of good features on the inside. Number 4, There's an app. I know, there's an app for everything. But if you look at some of the competitors out there, most of them also have an editor. So does Two Notes. Two Notes has the Torpedo remote that works on your Mac or PC. But they also have an application that works on iOS and Android called Torpedo Wireless Remote, which connects to the Captor X via Bluetooth. Now, how cool is that? There is a minimal difference between the Mac/PC software and the iOS Android app, which is on the application you cannot access the store and purchase cabinets, which is a minor thing, to be honest, because apart from that, you can control all the aspects of the unit, such as presets, cabinets, mics, etc., noise gate, routing options, everything is available. So let's say you're at a gig and you need to change something that you cannot access on the unit because there are a few things you can change, but not everything. You don't have to take your laptop with you. You can just connect with your phone, Android or iOS, Android or Apple, and just connect to the app and make all the changes you want. Number 5, the Captor X also has an attenuator that works in 3 steps. Step number 1 doesn't do any attenuation, so if you go from your amp into the Captor X and then into your cabinet, you'll have full volume. Then number 2 reduces it by a good amount, which I would say is something that if you're in a concert situation and you have a big enough room and big enough stage, that would be the option to choose because you still get a decent amount of stage volume, certainly enough to allow for additional miking if needed. And then number 3 actually reduces it by a good bit, which is the setting that I use if I'm playing at home and I still want to crank my amp, but not disturb my neighbors or my loved ones who have to suffer through all the pain. Number 6, routing options. Most people will just connect the Captor X stereo and be fine with it, but you can also use, alternatively, you can use dual mono for the output. Let's say you want to route the same mono signal but into 2 different directions. One goes into a monitor and the other one goes into front of house. You can do that. And the other thing you can do, which is what I'm using a lot of times these days, is you can send a wet signal on one side and a dry signal on the other side. That dry signal is not going to have cabinet processing. It's going to be as if you would record your amp without a cabinet. It sounds terrible if you listen to it, but then again, you can use the free included wall of sound software as a plugin on your computer. It's going to have all your cabs because it's sharing the same license as the Captor X. It's going to have all your cabs, and then you don't have to worry essentially about what kind of cab you're using to record. Just use the one that sounds decent in the moment, and then afterwards you could just re-cab the whole thing to the point where you like the cabinet, and there you go. Pro tip: this is actually also a great way to find your favorite sound and then save it as a preset. So in this case, you'll have free hands and you can adjust the way you want it and then afterwards save it as a preset. It's a lot better than playing and adjusting, believe me. In the past couple of years, I've used the Captor X on so many different recordings. Also, sonically speaking, like the guitar sounds that I was able to produce with the cabinet simulations, they couldn't be more different. It was everything from vintage clean to bluesy. To rock and roll-ish. And up to heavy sounds as well. I've also used the Captor X in live situations, and to be honest, I never had to use the application to adjust things. There are a couple of ways how you can interact with the unit that are pretty straightforward. You have an out level control in order to give more or less volume to the front of house or wherever you're sending the signal to. You have a voicing control, which essentially gives you a sound that is a bit more mid-focused, or something that has like a little bit of a mid-dip, and then gives you sort of a fuller sound speaking lower and higher frequencies. You have a space control, which pretty much changes the amount of room or reverb, the one that you've set up for each preset. And then, talking about presets, you also have 6 presets at your disposal that you can access directly from the unit, depending on what kind of sound you need in the moment. On the back of the unit, we have a couple of connections available for us. We have the speaker in connection, which, well, you'll use obviously going from your amp into the Captor X. Then you have a speaker out. If you want to use a cabinet, you can do that. That's where the cable goes. Then you can change the amount of attenuation from full to low. You also have left and right output. You have, well, the connector for the external power supply. And then we have 2 remote connections. One is USB, so if you're connected to your computer and you have the Torpedo remote software going on, then that's for that. And then you also have a Midi in. Imagine that. Let's say you have a larger setup, you have an amp, but you also control, let's say, your pedals and other aspects of your rig via Midi. You could actually use different cabinets for different songs or different parts of the set using Midi and changing presets within the Captor X. Alright, this was Gear Diary number 2. Now you know why the Captor X is my favorite piece of gear, and maybe it could be your favorite piece of gear in the future as well. If you are a amp, tube amp, whatever amp enthusiast, and you like recording at home, you like to crank your amp but not destroy your ears or your bandmates' ears. If you are in a live situation and you want to avoid using mics to bring the signal to front of house, you'll make your engineer a lot happier because he gets a ready to go signal. If you want to record at home, I might have said that, then the Captor X is definitely the perfect device for you. It's fairly affordable. It's a lot more affordable than a lot of cabinets, that I can tell you. And it's going to make your neighbors happy and your loved ones as well. Because thanks to the headphone output, nobody is going to hear what you're playing, what I'm playing, for that matter. If you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of that kind of content, then I strongly suggest that you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you get a notification when a new video drops. I'm planning to drop a new video every week, and the next stuff is already in planning. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.